Welcome to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast, where you can learn and be inspired by real-world examples of how technology is transforming businesses and reshaping industries in a language everyone can understand. Here is your host, Neil C. Hughes.
Welcome back to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast, brought to you from the UK, where, as Bob Marley would say right now, the sun is shining and the weather is sweet. Quite uncharacteristically for the UK, I know, but I have decided to take a break from replenishing my vitamin D to come back inside and talk with you all again today. And today's guest is Eric Drobisewski, and he is the Senior Architect of Fortune 100 Liberty Mutual Insurance. And Eric has more than 20 years of enterprise IT experience, spanning many technology verticals, including telecom, network and cloud services. And as a Senior Architect, he's responsible for more than 40,000 systems across the globe, all in a highly virtualized environment, with the goal of modernizing a significant portion of those workloads for public cloud platforms. And over the last several years, Eric's focus has been on Liberty Mutual's enterprise cloud strategy, strategic enablement, DevSecOps and infrastructure as code practices, and driving containerization as the company's core compute fabric. So, with the mass shift to remote work, he's going to speak about the technologies that have enabled Liberty Mutual's 40,000 plus global employees to succeed, as well as various areas of technology that the company. And also, I want to learn more about how they're aiming to fully pivot to the cloud and reduce their 3 owned data centers into a single one, with aspirations to get to 0 in the future. So buckle up and hold on tight as I beam your ears all the way stateside so we can speak with Eric about all this and much more. So a massive warm welcome to the show. Can you tell the listeners a little about who you are and what you do?
Sure, Neil. My name's Eric Drobisewski. I'm a senior architect at Liberty Mutual Insurance. I work in our global digital services organization, which essentially provides core digital capabilities back to our business. So we provide a lot of the foundational technology capabilities and platforms, whether that be in data center, outside of data center, public cloud, a lot of the transformational technologies and emerging tech that the business will need to thrive and build on in the future. So pretty exciting space, a lot of different opportunities that we get into here. And really it's been quite a journey, I'd say, over the last 5 or 6 years in terms of the focus on what we've been doing with cloud technologies and really building that hybrid bridge for our business in the future. So really exciting stuff.
And you also have more than 20 years of enterprise IT experience, spanning many technical verticals, including telecom, network and cloud services, to name but a few. And as Senior Architect, you are responsible for more than 40,000 systems across the globe in a highly virtualized environment, with the goal of modernizing a significant portion of these workloads for public cloud platforms, etc. No pressure there, right? I don't know how you sleep at night, but I'd love to begin by asking you to share your origin story and where it all began and where your love of technology came from.
Yeah, great question, Neil. And, it doesn't feel like it, but I've been in tech for about 20 years now. So my love for tech really came from back in the late 90s, early 2000s, really with the internet boom. And for me, it was just at the time, being really young, about 17, 18 years old at that time, and looking back and, seeing the internet for the first time. And, for me, it was through a dial-up connection over a 56K modem and, painful. But at the time it was like, wow, there's this whole new digital world kind of, coming to life out there. Right. And then within about a year, broadband came. And for me, that was when I was like, wow, this is real. And it just kind of dawned on me. And I just became immersed in this technology where it was seen in a way where it's like, I just didn't experience this before. And I started to learn HTML and JavaScript and different things, all self-taught, and just started to build websites. And that was kind of part of my path, where web development became a bit of passion in terms of, not only helping me, but helping others just kind of share and communicate and collaborate in a different way, right, across this digital world that just wasn't possible before. So that really is what I think got me, kind of bought into tech and really gave me the bug. And from there, I really just kind of saw the opportunity from a job perspective and a career perspective and what that meant, right? There was just a lot of endless possibilities. And jumped into Liberty Mutual, a couple years after that. And it just kind of, I'd say the rest is history, right? There's been a lot of different opportunities across the tech vector there in terms of, what I've done and what I've been involved in, all the way from mainframe into, web development, into mid-range systems, public cloud, and now a lot of the stuff in the cloud native space. So, the gamut of technology and the different things that we've done over that time frame is nothing short of remarkable. But that's how I got my start.
And despite all that progress you've seen and the evolution of the web, do you still miss the sweet sound of a 56K US robotics modem?
Oh, I don't know if any of us that experience that will ever truly miss it, but it's definitely something that I think we could all, have some fond memories of. And for me, those memories is really kind of getting that start, although it was painful and broadband was a very welcomed technology shift. It really was that, that blossom of the internet where it was like, wow, just felt like the possibilities again were so endless. So yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And here in 2021, just about every organisation of every size has been forced to rethink the future of work. And last year, I think even Microsoft CEO said that they'd experienced 2 years of digital transformation in just 2 months. But it was several years ago that Liberty Mutual developed a technology manifesto, which consisted of a 6-page document that explained where they were going, what needed to change as part of your transformational journey. Sounds incredibly forward thinking and ahead of your time, especially over what happened. But can you expand on that for the listeners?
Absolutely, Neil. I think, looking back at that, that and several other assets were critical to our transformation. And I do credit our great leaders at Liberty and some of the folks that have been brought together around this to really get, I'd say, out in front of what's possible here and where do we need to be from a competitive landscape perspective, right? And you referenced our technology manifesto. Alongside with that, we had some kind of what we called our kind of aspirational goals, or our BAMs, our bold, audacious moves. And these are all great things for us to see as really the North Star for what Liberty Mutual, was leading towards and what we wanted to, do over those next several years to really, grow, compete, and evolve. So when we look back at kind of what we were kind of setting out on there, I think the key things were we were seeing the trends in the industry, right? Like customer centricity, digital first to kind of win on the digital front were all key things that were coming. And I'd say when we look back, 5-6 years ago now, I think you're right that we were maybe a little ahead of the curve on that. But now we look at where we're at today, and those are imperatives. Like you have to be able to execute at the highest levels on those things to win and grow. And, I think when we look at what we've done there, it was that balanced approach, right, on really transforming, I'd say, our culture, most importantly, to really provide greater velocity and agility back to our business. And a lot of it was focused on shifting the way we work, too. So shifting from those traditional models where things is I think in project management terms, we always use the waterfall term, right, where it was kind of order in, order out, very request-driven, ticket-driven type processes, to a much more agile culture where we have squads of teams aligned around product-driven functions and focus now. And that's given us so much more agility to, I think most importantly, meet the near-term needs of our customers very, very quickly and get product out to them just at a much more rapid pace than what we've done traditionally. So that was a huge component for us in just terms of, transforming the way that we worked. And alongside with that, it was really optimizing our technology architecture as well. So when we look at the transformation there, obviously 100-plus-year-old insurance company, right? We have a lot of different technical debt, if you want to call it that kind of was, core to what we've done for decades and decades. Public cloud was certainly a piece of, I think we saw as innovation and growth for us that would help transform. So really optimizing our tech architecture around what are we doing in the data center? What are we doing in our private clouds? How do we start to create that hybrid cloud bridge? And how do we start to enable public cloud, knowing over time our goals is to move out of our data centers and more heavily rely on cloud capabilities. So that was a huge piece of it as well. And I think alongside with that, that was the big shift in the skill sets that happened as well. So we had the cultural piece happening in the way we work, we had the technology piece, and then we had the kind of the education piece and kind of the retooling, I'd call it, I guess, around kind of what we were doing from both a business perspective and an IT perspective to really start to move to core engineering practices. So the system administration roles shifting to engineering and public cloud, and the development roles shifting to that agile development model. It was really the combination of these things. And then underlying all of that was really relying on data. So becoming a truly data-driven organization in terms of what we were doing to provide those insights and make better data-driven decisions as a company on the things that were coming down the road for us. So those are the real highlights, I'd say, of what underlied our tech manifesto, what underlied our transformation, and things that we continue to practice to this day that are helping us evolve, right? Because a lot of things I'm talking about here is, being agile, right? It's like you're never done. You're always learning. I think it's building that culture of continuous learning that was a key component in here for us too. So when we look at meeting our people where they were at in this journey, that's hugely important with the size of a business that we run and the number of employees we have, with 40,000 plus employees across the globe, meeting them where they're at in that transformation too, and providing those opportunities. And I look now, we've definitely built, I think, a strong culture of continuous learners where the things we know today probably won't be permanent forever. So it's really starting to ingrain in our processes how we do this over time, right? So we look at the next thing and the next thing after that and continue to learn and continue to grow as a company and as an organization.
And if we look back, just 18 months ago, there was that mass shift to remote working, and even everything shopping went online, and many businesses struggled to adapt because of legacy technology, legacy VPNs, applications. And there was a store over here in the UK called Primark that went £650 million in revenue a month to zero because they didn't have an online website, funnily enough, which seems a bit odd in this day and age. But I'm curious, what kind of technologies have enabled Liberty Mutual's global employees to succeed? Because you said there was, 40 to 50,000 of them there scattered all around the world. So how did tech help you succeed and manage that?
Yeah, that's right, Neil. We do. We have, just over 40,000 employees across the globe. And when we look at that, it's a diverse set of needs. And I remember for me personally, going back to March of 2020 as the pandemic kind of was underway, right? And I think everyone was starting to wonder, is like, what does this really mean? And I remember in early March, for myself, I actually had just come back from a, kind of an international trip. And, it was that first week of March. And I think I was kind of, shocked, right? I kind of hadn't seen all the news unfold quite yet. And, as it just kind of moved forward, we were quickly rallying around, I'd say, all of the critical components that were needed to ramp up our core infrastructure and security technologies to handle that capacity, where traditionally on, say, a Friday, we might have 7,000 to 10,000 people that might work from home, right? We were definitely more of an in-office first experience for work overall. And we'd have remote options and hybrid options for employees, very flexible model, I'd say, but by and large, very much in office. So we were ramping that up, 4 to 5-fold from what we were normally at, right? So we were starting to prep in the weeks prior, just kind of, I'd say, getting insights from, the news and industry and other leaders about where this thing might be headed. So a lot of good foundational work was invested in those few short weeks leading up to, the shift to full remote. And I'd say beyond that, some of the most important things that really helped to enable some of that was we were already on a journey around zero trust. So the networking kind of model, right? We're redefining our security model, redefining the perimeter of how we thought about security, and really embracing that zero trust type model. So that was already well underway for Liberty Mutual, which I think was an important aspect of enabling the network connectivity that we needed to support remote employees at a 40 to 50,000 scale, right? And then the modern identity infrastructure was really, I'd say, the second piece, where we'd already really paved the way around what our modern identity needed to look like and how it would work from, most importantly, the employee experience aspect of it. So I'd say those key runway items for us were timed quite nicely in terms of enabling some of this. And we also were kind of starting down the path of using Office 365 with more regularity too. So leveraging those technologies became really core and mainstream, right? When you think about collaboration across a workforce that diverse and that large, having collaboration tools you can rely on are super, super critical. So those are all, I'd say, key components. But I'd say the last thing, honestly, outside of the technology, and most importantly, would be the resilience of our people. The people we have across the globe, across this company are so special. And they were tremendous throughout this. Their perseverance, the creativity, the ways they found to work together and to work to bring us forward through this was just absolutely amazing. I think, we saw just ways that they were shining in every capacity imaginable, which was just tremendous. And it's enduring through this day where we're still fully remote. Liberty Mutual has not returned to full in-office work for anyone at this point outside of personnel that must be in the office for critical needs. So we're continuing to do it to this day. And I think, it served us well over the 16-month period or so that we've been at this. And I think we're continuing to find new ways over that time to even get more creative about how we work and how we can be more effective.
And you did mention a few moments ago the importance of continuous improvement. And I think you're so right there, because we've now adjusted to remote working, but now, of course, we're migrating to a more hybrid working approach. And I think we're also investigating how we can improve how we work, and from anywhere and on any device and at any time. So I'm curious, when we're looking at improving what we've created here, are there any other technologies that you're exploring there?
Yeah, there absolutely are, Neil. I'd say that the journey with this is never done. New emerging tech is coming out continuously in this space. I'd say one of the areas personally to me, and I see with the teams that I work with on a daily basis, is collaboration technologies, right? Like getting away from where we were always like in a boardroom in front of a whiteboard, right? Like that was a way that we drew out creativity, brought ideas forward, shared kind of opinions and thoughts. So virtual whiteboarding technology, I'd say, are super, super critical. We're exploring several of those at Liberty. I'd say some definitely work a little better than others, and some work really well in large group settings as well. But I think that's a key element of how we kind of recreate some of that collaboration, ideation, and group thinking in this remote environment, right? And I think that's something that's going to continue to serve us well as we move forward into probably a more hybrid work environment, right? Where you've got maybe some remote, some in office, and you've got this true hybrid experience. So I think having those virtual collaboration technologies for kind of whiteboarding and ideation are critical. One of the other pieces, obviously, I think Office 365, things like Zoom, right? Those are at the forefront of this. The video conferencing is so critical. But I think as Microsoft and others start to unveil new capabilities in their suites, right? I think those are key pieces that we're continuing to look at. We're definitely on the front lines of enabling new and emerging functionality that comes out from those providers in that space to help strengthen that remote work experience, knowing that, we're going to be sustaining this type of model for the foreseeable future, and it'll likely be that kind of hybrid model. So we'll continue to invest in it. And I'd say the last thing, and I think all organizations struggle with this, and we kind of label it our last mile connectivity, right, is really looking at that remote experience, but how do you ensure that it works well and you have equity in that experience for all employees, right? So thinking about the connections in their home, the connection with their own ISPs, and how do we get better at helping to optimize those, helping to debug those, get insights out of them so that we can ensure that we've got the best possible performance and experience for all of our remote employees. So that's a piece that we've been focused on, I'd say, the last 6 to 9 months, and we'll continue to do so, is really kind of to, hone in on that last mile connectivity, because everything outside that, I think we've got a pretty good grasp on, but it's really that last mile coming into people's homes and what's become their workplace to make sure that experience is the best it can be.
And as emerging technologies such as IoT and 5G have not only become more mainstream, they're also beginning to converge. And of course, the amount of data that companies are collecting on a daily basis has dramatically increased. And there are more cloud storage questions as a result of all that. So can you tell me more about why now is the time for companies to adopt an edge computing and hybrid cloud approach, and how Liberty Mutual is actually utilizing these methods in order to capitalize on that customer-centric opportunities out there? Because again, that is top of most companies' agenda now, isn't it? So important as the customer needs continue to evolve.
Absolutely, Neil. You're spot on. It's a great question, right? When we think about where things are headed, I always say there'll never be less data than we have today. And you think about that, and it's like, yeah, it's true, but it's not the opportunity only around the amount of data being transmitted or that any organization might be able to collect. It's really your ability to harness the data and look at that and gain real usable insights that allow you to differentiate in the future, whether that's through people, ML, AI. It's the ability to gain the insights out of that data. And I think that's the key for us when we look at the continuum of computing, as I like to look at it, where traditionally everything we've done heavily has always relied on these centralized computing models, whether it's mainframe, data centers, physical servers, right? The dawn of virtualization, which is still with us today, led into the creation of these great private clouds that many companies across the globe have built, and now public cloud, all very centralized computing models. When we look at what you were talking about and kind of, the edge computing aspect and where that's headed, that's really that continuation of that continuum of computing. When we think about edge, it really starts to provide a much more distributed control plane for computing, so we can shift the computing power to a much more localized model, driving down latency, driving down processing times, and really shifting to real-time data-driven insights that are closest to the consumer. So that's the big opportunity, some exciting stuff here. I think when you think about edge, and certainly 5G plays a role in terms of connectivity here. I think IoT is another key aspect where I think we've heard about that for, well, over a decade at this point in terms of the massive amounts of, IoT technology that'll be out there. I think it's the combination of these three technologies that'll really start to bring the dawn of this new era in terms of connectivity. So some of the things, we're seeing happening in and around us, right, in the insurance and financial services industry, is telematics is certainly a big piece of it. When we think about that, it's not only using telematics to get telemetry and data out of the vehicle, but now more importantly, bringing that processing real time into the vehicle. So on device, in vehicle processing at the edge that's going to provide real-time feedback back to the driver, right? So we can offer those usage-based insurance models, but we can also start to offer more performance-driven metrics back to the user real-time through their vehicle. So that processing would happen there. I think Tesla is certainly no slouch when it comes to the autonomous vehicle market. They're certainly leading the way there on all fronts, and they've got things out there that you may have heard of, right? When their Sentry mode was introduced, and that's essentially a feature that processes signal data from the onboard sensors locally to identify whether it's like vandalism, car theft, or alerts prior to sending that out, and doing that and sending the video back to the cloud. So my kind of take on this is what we're really kind of starting to rally around is that a lot of the processing and real-time insights via AI ML will shift to the edge, and a lot of the data and analytics work will still primarily be done back in cloud, right? Where the big number crunching can be done, that aggregation can happen, the analytics can happen. But to drive those more real-time experiences, it's going to be critical to shift that processing out to the edge. And we're seeing that, through I'd say the cloud native ecosystem is a big driver for a lot of this technology. We're seeing, technologies like containers and Kubernetes and different things start to push out there. We're also seeing large partners, whether it's Amazon, Google, or Microsoft, the hyperscalers, right, start to embed with the telcos where they're starting to distribute their technology capabilities beyond where their foundational regions and availability zones were to much more local zone type models. So we're definitely seeing that emerge as well. So I think the next few years are really going to start to unfold, what this continuum starts to look like and how we kind of naturally extend that computing zone from that central model to that more distributed local model.
And like I said a few moments ago, there will never be less data than there is today. And with data continuously flowing in from all areas of the network, the infrastructure to store it must keep up as well. And I think now more than ever, every business has got one eye on the budgets and trying to keep costs down. And as they try and hit the ground running and bounce back, and those cloud storage costs are going to keep adding up. So can you tell me a little bit more about why instituting a hybrid cloud strategy and adopting edge computing can keep costs in check and evolve in real time and handle those increased data flows? Because that seems to be a bit of a secret recipe there.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, Neil, for us at Liberty Mutual too, right? Like, we've been around for over 100 years, right? Our business was not born in the cloud. I think for most enterprises and large organization, that holds true as well. And hybrid cloud really is a bit of a necessity based on how those businesses were built and created. And I think, the born in the cloud type stuff is easy, right? If you were starting new today, it'd be easy to say, let's start in the cloud, let's do that. But for many of these other companies that I spoke of, it's really important to think about how hybrid cloud supports that model, how you create that bridge. And I think the key piece is modernization within that. So when we look at cloud, it's not just about lifting and shifting all of the things that you've done for the last 50, 70, 80, 100 plus years in some cases out to the cloud. Like if we think about that, and we bring all those processes forward, if we bring all those applications, workloads, and technologies and practices and learnings forward, you're going to get more of the same, but just in a different data center and potentially at a higher cost structure, depending on how optimized your internal cloud is. So I think for us in how we look at it, modernization is definitely a very key dimension of how to look at that transition and that transformation into public cloud. So you can start to look at modernizing, your workload, your technology footprint, the way you work, the skills that you have, really embracing that DevOps philosophy, I think, around how you codify everything essentially and software define everything all the way from the foundational infrastructure all the way throughout your full application stack so that you can understand, how this stuff can be delivered through code, through a declarative type of deployment model. And we don't have to, heavily rely on people to kind of pull all of these things together over time, right? Because the configuration drift around these systems is real. And I think where we find value is that our people are powerful in the automation they can drive around these systems now. So driving those great insights that they have into higher value automation and helping them shift to the more differentiating work around that is really, really key. So that's a big piece for us in terms of, optimizing our private cloud and software defining it to the fullest extent. So we have a really good set of capabilities that are on parity with public cloud, and then providing that hybrid bridge for that modernization transition over time. So looking at how we start to move workloads effectively for the greatest benefit of the business, whether it's at a cost level, capability level, to really get that greatest value out of cloud. That's been key for us. And then I'd say the last thing to mention is that, we're going to continue to see that shift, right? I think, the falling cost of the chips out there, the decreased size, the network capacity is just going to massively increase. Connectivity with 5G, right, is happening real time. So we really start to want to think about how do we accelerate workload delivery to any form factor, irregardless if it's in data center, in public cloud, on edge, in an IoT device, that we have capabilities that can push workload out there without having to make so many design time decisions about where the code might run, right? So really thinking business first capabilities and thinking about how we have a more uniform and consistent platform approach to pushing those capabilities out, irregardless of compute platform.
And if I ask you to look into your virtual crystal ball, is there anything that you see that might happen next in the new hyper-connected era that we're heading towards? Is there anything that excites you or anything that you're noticing?
Yeah, I think on the topics we've been talking about, Neil, I think, we're definitely going to see, the emergence of 5G. We're already seeing it in large metro areas. So that technology, I'd say not alone. It's going to help to augment and support some of the hyper connection we're talking about. So when we think about that kind of digital fabric and that ecosystem, right, is connecting that back, lowering the latency, pushing up what we can do from a connectivity perspective to drive those real-time insights. So I think we're going to see a world over the next 5 years where the amount of ambient technology in and around us is going to increase dramatically, whether it's in our houses, in our vehicles, in our cities and towns, through healthcare, at the places that we do business. We're going to start to see technology immersed in and around us, and it won't even be, I think in some cases we'll be fully aware of some of those things, right? We're going to see businesses start to drive more real-time experiences out based on those insights. And I think that's the big opportunity and shift we see, where I feel the world we were talking about around kind of IoT 8 to 10 years ago, I feel over the next 5, we're really going to start to see that come into play. And again, I feel kind of like as the internet boom had started, we're going to start to see this connectivity boom now, where we can really start to create these more real-time, data-driven experiences that are really aligned around what the customer, what the customer needs are and what the customer looks like now and in the future. So I think that's the big piece around what I see. I think that's going to help us with customer engagement. I think that's going to help at a global scale as well. And I think it's going to help us from a dynamic set of capabilities in terms of how we can orchestrate that very dynamically, no matter where we're at, again, whether it's in a vehicle, in a house, in a business, in a commercial facility, or in a city or town. I think that's going to provide us that framework, so to speak, that's really going to push us forward there. So I think those are some of the big things I see, and definitely starting to see, pieces of that materialize. And I think, over the next few years, we're really going to start to see a lot of new capabilities arrive in those areas.
Well, I've loved chatting with you today, and we began the podcast with talking about your origin story, and I'd like to finish by something I always ask my guests, and that's if there's a particular song or piece of music that has inspired them or helped them in their career, or just helps them get their head in the zone before going on stage or going in a big meeting, or just reminds them of their career. Is there a particular song that springs to mind for you, and why would that be?
Oh, it's a great question, Neil. There's so many possible answers here. I personally love all different types of music. It doesn't really matter what it is, whether it's rock or hip hop or country or classic. I love them all. I'd say for me, the one, that stood the test of time for a bit now, it's Kanye West, and it's Through the Wire. And I think for me, it just represents, the struggle he went through, recording that album, making a breakthrough, and just some of the beats and the lyrics that he pulls together around it. They just really stand the test of time. And I think as a creative artist, Kanye is definitely one that stands out. So that's one that's always stuck with me.
What a great choice there. And I'll be adding that to the playlist that accompanies this podcast. But before I let you go, finally, for anyone listening want to find out more about the kind of work that you're doing, or find out more about Liberty Mutual Insurance, what's the best way of doing that and contacting your team?
Yeah, for me directly, anyone can feel free to find me on LinkedIn at Eric Drobisewski. And then for Liberty Mutual Relations, you can certainly reach out via mediarelations@libertymutual.com, or sign up for an auto policy at libertymutual.com as well.
Well, there's something that I often say, and that is that the speed of technological change is moving at breakneck speed, and a lot of companies are struggling to keep up. But the reality is it will never move this slow again. And after speaking with you today, I'm now going to put at the end of that, and there will never be less data than there is today. It's so true. And thank you so much for taking the time to share your story and your insights with me today.
Likewise. Thank you, Neil. Thanks for having me on today. Really appreciate it. And this is a great conversation.
So a big thank you to Eric for coming on the podcast today and talking about the importance of a robust tech fabric, and discussing how the company implements Kubernetes, serverless and AI and machine learning, and why they rely on this array of cloud-native solutions versus going all in on one. And I think just last year they executed 57.5 billion serverless transactions, which is just phenomenal. And of course, I also enjoyed hearing about their cloud journey, and as newer technologies like IoT and 5G have become more mainstream, the amount of data that companies collect on a daily basis has increased exponentially and just raises more and more cloud storage questions. But Eric answered those questions perfectly today. I cannot thank him enough for coming on. But over to you. Now it's your turn to make your voice heard by sharing your comments, questions, insights, areas of expertise, or even a request to come and join me on the podcast. Whatever it is, please email me techblogwriter@outlook.com. My website is techblogwriter.co.uk. I'd love to hear your thoughts on today's conversation, and I will be back same time, same place tomorrow with another guest. So thank you for listening as always, and until next time, don't be a stranger.
Thank you for listening to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast with Neil C. Hughes. Remember, technology works best when it brings people together.